Excellent point. Thank you for making that.
Please.
If I could comment on your second question, you know, in Eastern Oregon, the maintenance of our existing system is very, very important. You know, we have always been opposed to giving up your existing system for new roads. You know, we don't think that is there's any sense in that at all, okay? So Region 5 has done a good job. I think you will find Region 5 roads are probably in better shape than any throughout the state. So they've done a good job on that, but we always want you to keep that in mind. Now, for economic development, for transportation, our needs tend to be smaller, you know, paved roads in an industrial park. Be as simple as that, you know. That doesn't sound like much, but that can be an issue to get people to come. And we are very limitedly funded, so those programs that provide those opportunities are very important to us. At the scale we have a lot more issues than just roads, okay? We've had discussions with OTEC, who provides power in Union and Baker and Harney County, and our problem is we can't get enough energy to bring somebody like Amazon or Google or anybody here. Now, we have wonderful connections in LeGrand. We have 4 fiber optic lines, and the manager of OTEC tells me, he said, Steve, I could get you from 3 to 5 megawatts. If I go beyond that, I got to build transmission lines. So that's a huge barrier to us, you know, and we're going through the battle of the B2H. I don't know if you know what B2H, it's Boardman to Hemingway power line, and we've been doing this for 10 years. They dropped it on us this summer that they're going to put it within 4/10 of the city limits of LeGrand, so it's going to be a real controversial battle that we're going to be going through in the next months. We had asked them to stay next to the 230, but stay out of the view shed of LeGrand, and they didn't do it. So, you know, we've got a lot of issues. It's also an issue of resources, natural resource issues. You know, when I became commissioner, we got $1.1 million the first year I was here from the Forest Service. And by 1996, it was down to $56,000. Okay, that's what the listing of salmon did to us. Everybody talks about the spotted owl. We in Eastern Oregon that are not covered by the dams in the Snake River wind up with an endangered species that was just as hard on us as anything the spotted owl. And we didn't get any support from the federal government. We got nothing. So we have been living, you know, hand to mouth. SRS with Senator Craig and Ron Wyden, you know, the thing was there for almost 17 years, and they stopped it this year, okay? So resource issues are big for us. So there's a whole myriad of issues that we have to deal with. I mean, I sit and look at Umatilla County, who changes 80 acres of EFU to industrial, and Amazon gives them 4 call centers. Do you know what those call centers are worth? What are they worth, Larry?
I'm not supposed to say.
Okay. Larry won't tell you because he's negotiating a SIP as I speak. I know he is. But we can't do that in Union County, okay? Then you go to the windmills in Gillum and Sherman County, they give money back to the citizens from the wind farms, and they're still losing population. So I don't know what that says about Sherman County. And then you see what's going on in the Dalles? You know who's building that big building down there? Google. I was in the Dalles last weekend for a GOBI meeting, and all these construction people are there, and you ask them where they're working, and they all tell you, well, we can't tell you. Everybody knows it's Google. I mean, but Google is so paranoid, they don't want anybody to know anything. And then we sit out on this far east side. You take the far 6 east side counties, Malheur, Harney, you know, Baker Grant, Union, Wallow, we're almost a third of the area of the state with 5% of the population. And it's a different role. I don't know if any of you have seen the book that the Employment Department put out about employment in Eastern Oregon. You need a copy of that and read it. It's real, you know. There was a piece in Time magazine in 2008 that said there would be parts of this country that would not recover from the 2008 recession. And it would be rural areas with older populations. And guess what you're looking at here? We're rural areas with older populations. And it's very difficult for us to do it. You know, it's just easy to say, hey, go out and find an economic development answer. I don't know what it is, and it's not because we haven't looked. And, you know, Port of Morrow is a great example. I mean, look what they've done for Morrow County. I mean, I'm envious, but we have drawbacks where we can't do it. And that's, Baker County isn't any different than we are. So
we're younger.
but you know, transportation is important, but there's still a lot of other issues that really impact us out here. And when you talk about it, our transportation system on the state level is not bad. Our problem is city and counties, okay? And I think that's pretty consistent. You know, there's a few that aren't. You know, you take Grant County, they got enough timber receipts at one time, they have reserves, but the rest of us are pretty much hand to mouth, aren't we, Susan?
I'm not quite there yet. I still have a little bit more.
Well, good.
So commissioners, do we have, I know that you were holding on to a question as well, or a comment.
Just more a comment,
Okay.
and I think going back, and I think one of the reasons we're here is that we want to have a lens of the concerns of each county, see what's happening from an economic development standpoint, and clearly, when we started, when we were charged to kind of come up with a framework for the legislation, maintenance of the current system was first and foremost, that we invest to preserve and protect what we have. And the governor had put together a visioning panel, which was to look at all modes of transportation and all geographic regions of the state. So we tried to incorporate the findings of that work and to look at safety concerns. Rural concerns are very different than in metropolitan areas, and the statistics, unfortunately, have gone south in a negative way on everything. So, you know, is it distracted driving? So how do you get after safety? But then address the seismic concerns, which are probably more on the western side of the state, and we're in a safer part here. But transit was something that every community, big and small, wanted. People want to be able to get around in their communities, and so and bike and pedestrian needs, and we had just finished a statewide plan there, but approached it with everybody has skin in the game, and heaven forbid I invoke the words of Ronald Reagan, but it was really he wanted transportation to be a user fee based system, and that those who benefit from it, and this is to your comment, Susan, about those who benefit from the system should pay into it, and that we should draw less on general fund resources and have those who benefit from the system actually contribute to its maintenance, upkeep, and expansion. That was our approach. We went into it with everybody's got skin in the game, everything's on the table, and let's see where we go. And that's why, you know, we currently have some of the lowest vehicle registration and licensing fees in the country. So they're going to trickle up a little bit. And looking at the mechanisms that are in place to pay for it. But as you guys well know, this stuff does not come cheaply. It's huge investment doing infrastructure. But it does make a difference in facilitating the kind of economic development we've seen, and that hopefully will come this direction. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I think I grew up in Deschutes County, and I don't think I would have imagined that Crook County would be an epicenter for servers either. So, I mean, things do change. I think transportation's a big part of it. Look, we're going to need your help and your input in how we execute this program going forward, and in the resources that'll be out here. But I just want to echo what's been said earlier, and thank you for having us here. It's really awesome to be here, and we're learning from you guys. So appreciate the conversation, and thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, I feel like there's a common theme here in regards to the economic sustainability of this region, and I was just curious as to if this region has any plans or any ideas about essentially how it plans to stabilize, and more importantly, how it foresees its own growth. As I was articulating earlier about the reports that I was reading coming over, it did touch upon some elements of other parts of the state as well, and I believe this particular Northeast region has like a people in poverty level of those that are on upwards of 20,000, and I think that's pretty high for the amount of the population that this area covers. And furthermore, in terms of median income, I believe it's like around $20,000 to $25,000. So even though this is not entirely ancillary to transportation, in a lot of ways it is, because if there are aspirations and plans for this region in terms of how to restore or rebuild its economy and its ecosystem here, what role would the transportation system play in that plan? And that's one of the questions I had for you guys to elaborate on.
I like that one. Okay, so I represent the bike ped portion of this, and improving our area. I have a bike store in LeGrand, and I enviously watch everybody go up to Coeur d'Alene, and they ride the rail line up there on their bikes, and they buy lights, and I enviously watch all these transcontinental cyclists coming through Baker, and they all go around LeGrand, which is where I'm based. We are the only bike shop in the region, so we pull 3 counties, often 4 counties worth of individuals into our shop. But LeGrand itself doesn't necessarily sustain us because all the money has to come from somewhere else. The way I see improving our area and getting more money into this region related transportation is the path that would run from Wallow Lake all the way to Enterprise along that rail line. They have been pushing that. I have been crossing my fingers, and there's a lot of opposition to it, but it would pour money into various parts of this part of Oregon. The other thing that I really look at is the transcontinental people that are trying to go across the United States. They choose to go through Baker because if you choose to go through LeGrand, you actually have to ride on the freeway. You have to ride on the freeway to get out. That's another issue that I would really like to see tackled. And yes, they have drawn up some very pretty sketches, and we have talked about it, but it's also something that is very expensive because there are cliffs and rivers and salmon and a lot of factors to take into consideration. So back to bringing money into this area. Of course, I'm looking at tourism. Cycling tourism is huge, and those 2 things would really bring it to Wallowa County and Union County as well.
Madam Chair, to kind of go back to your question, Commissioner Simpson, talking about a sustainable economy for all of Eastern Oregon, as all of you know, Eastern Oregon from Deschutes and even Deschutes County on east is agricultural based. It's also ag based, a lot of it in the valley. But the opportunity for industry, where the population centers are, that helps Western Oregon grow, of course, and that's where the economy is. And I'll use Umatilla County kind of as an example. The eastern and northeastern side of Umatilla County has a much lower per capita average income than the western side of the county. simply because of location, location, location. They've got rail, they have river traffic, and the intersection of two freeways. As you move west into rural, or east, excuse me, into rural Oregon, yes, fewer people, a greater number of county road miles, most of them unimproved. And the biggest problem, I think, unless some of my colleagues from the other counties will correct me, are the young families or young children from those families. They look at other areas and say, I want a good family wage job, and they don't stay here. And it may be because of a number of factors. And it's not all transportation related, but that's a big part of it. So they'll move to the metro areas. Better jobs, better salaries. And what you see coming back to our counties are families with no children. They're retired. That income is limited to a certain extent. But a lot of times, they're not ready to invest in a lot of that infrastructure. So they're not willing to pay those extra dollars. You mentioned paying for that infrastructure. So as you come east, I do worry about the sustainability of the eastern side of the state, simply for those reasons. And when you look at the number of miles, and I'll use Umatilla County, we did very, very well on this last legislative session. And we had a state representative that, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, and I'm not apologizing for it, but we had a state representative that, because he'd been there a long time, was on some committees and had some seniority, brought back some money to his district. It was both Morrow County and Umatilla County. But when you look at the overall amount of roads and the distance that people have to commute, it takes more, and it takes more effort. Mary Jo talked about the needs in rural areas. Rural areas are unique, and you folks know that, and that she has to do several jobs. I don't know how many of you were raised and went to school in a very small community, or if any of you did. But a small community and the schools in that community with few students, those kids did everything. They may have been on all three teams. They may have been on the student body, officers, a lot of different things, because to function, they had to do a lot of those things. And that's kind of the way our rural communities are. So they need some special help, and we need some special recognition. I don't know if that makes sense or it answers your question, Commissioner Simpson.
Please.
As it happens, I was just doing some kind of demographic gathering as I was renewing our Title VI plan for civil rights. And I don't know why, but I was a little bit shocked, because I tend to think of Baker County as kind of maintaining those numbers. It used to be our Baker County went between 18 and 20%, maybe a little bit higher, of those persons over 65 years of age. And but when I reviewed those numbers, and we're not younger. When I reviewed those numbers, 33% of Baker County are people over 60 or over. That's 1/3 of our county, 60 or over. And it's not to say everybody's retired, because obviously not, but it shows the demographic. Baker's demographic in the middle, kind of that working age, is lower in average than the state, and our child's, the small children actually isn't that much lower. So it really shows that that people of working age leave. They go to school, they never come back. None of my nieces and nephews did, you know, because we have no industry. When I was growing up, we had 2 lumber mills in Baker City, and there were family wage jobs. They carried benefits. Those are all gone. Nothing has replaced it. We have Balin Manufacturing. So Baker County has made great strides to develop a wonderful tourism industry. The nature of tourism generally generates service jobs, and this is where you're seeing the wages that you are, because what you're seeing is people who are working in restaurants, they're working in motels, they're working in retail stores. There is no I don't want to say there's no industry, because they worked to bring some industry in, but and one of the comments that I heard in relation to transportation, where this kind of my meandering conversation's going, is that at one point in time I remember a conversation, and that if we were to develop some kind of industry, we need better. We do have the rail going through Baker, we have the freeway going through Baker, but if we were to develop something like, I don't know, Google coming in, whatever, you know, is a really developed airport, because people who are bringing executives in, or if they need to travel, you know, this is a remote area. They're probably not going to want to drive 3 hours. Our closest airport, large airport, is Boise, you know, which is a 2.5-hour drive. So I would say, if anything, you know, the fiber optics, we need that, and because I think that is helpful to create, and the power and access by maybe way of air, or the 700-mile-an-hour bullet train or something like that. But anyway, so that's kind of where the rural areas lie, and I don't think Baker County is alone in that. The timber industry is gone, and that was, you saw generations work in there. You saw dads who worked in the mill and had a decent wage and a decent job, maybe a machinist or a manager or whatever, and their sons would go into that sometimes, and that just isn't present anymore. And I think that's a great loss, and that's why I think we're losing people. We're a great place to retire, you know, but even in Baker City, we're discovering a housing crisis, and now we're struggling. We have families, we have a family of 7 kids right now who can't find a place to live. So we're starting to see some more broad things going on. But in terms of transportation, connectivity to help develop industry, that's...
I'd just like to make a comment that there are a couple ways I think that small counties can grow, and one of them is our natural resource. And we have great beauty here that's tough to duplicate. And we have plenty of timber if we could just cut it. So that's one leg of the economy. And the other is the internet. One of my counselors is a project manager for a high-tech company in the Bay Area. He works out of his house. He's gone maybe 3 or 4 days out of the month, but the rest of the time he's working from his house as a project manager in high tech. He countryized his kids. They raise cattle and have 3 or 4, and so they're loving it. But we have actually in Joseph a population explosion of little ones. I mean, we just built a new playground, and I mean, I've never seen so many little kids in strollers in my life. I said, where do these people come from? I mean, so, and we have people who went to school here, went to the West Side, went to college, and started a family, and they're moving back and they're buying businesses, hardware store, restaurants, and they want to raise their kids in this atmosphere. And we just need to add a little more infrastructure to help them along. But there are a lot of people that don't like the hubbub of the West Side. This area, all of Eastern Oregon, has a lot to offer. And I think as people look at it and say, hey, life is short, you know, I spent 40 years in Portland as outside sales. I spent half my life, I think, at stoplights. So when people ask me what I like about Wallowa County, number one, there are no stoplights. You know, that's the kiss of death around here. If I want to do somebody in, I said, I hear they wanted to put a stoplight in. Oh, really? Yeah, boy. So anyhow, I think there's a lot going on over here.
If I could go back to Matt's comment for just a little bit, and then I'd also like to make a comment on Commissioner Simpson's question. But to Matt's comment about efficiency and the way we spend our money, I've actually got two examples of that. One really good and one not so good. The fund exchange program. Currently, let me go back. A number of years ago, ODOT set up a fund exchange for the STP funds that came from federal government to counties and cities. That works marvelously. That allows us to turn what could only be used for capital improvements, basically, into maintenance dollars, and maintenance is very, very important to us. More recently, Paul Mather, McGregor Lind, and on our local liaisons like Mike Berry, they've put together a fund exchange program for bridges. I see that as being extremely important moving forward. We can't let that die. That has to be allowed to live. Josephine County, for instance, they just did an exchange on a bridge that was essentially, I think I haven't got the actual numbers on the cost savings, but as close as I can tell, we were talking about probably maybe up to a 50% cost savings by exchanging those dollars from a federal project to a state project. It was huge. Now the downside moving forward is some of the things that we're seeing through the intergovernmental agreements. These agreements are getting tied up in Salem to the point to where they are becoming extremely costly to the programs. We're seeing, one of my other hats, I sit on the State Bridge Selection Committee, and we have actually seen where, because of the window of opportunity to do some of this construction, these agreements get tied up in Salem. The projects can't be delivered in a timely fashion. So now all of a sudden we have money sitting in a queue that can't go out to the project because the IGA is not going through, it's getting hung up on somebody's desk, and that's a risk management thing. Quite honestly, Matt and his staff ought to be taking care of the risk management. The attorneys should just be approving the contract. Mm-hmm. Right now it's the tail wagging the dog. Matt and his folks are delivering a viable agreement to Salem, and then for instance, we had in Umatilla County, I've had 2 agreements now that ended up having commissioner signatures going, and everything was all fine and good, went to Salem, got hung up on somebody's desk, and all of a sudden came back for nothing. I mean, it was some really insignificant things. In here, attorneys tend to look for the perfect agreement that nobody's going to get hurt on. Well, I'm sorry. Agreements of any kind are risk. Risk management should sit with Matt and Craig and those folks. If they say we're okay to go, we should be okay to go. Some of the, I just can't say it strongly enough. I really believe that some of that's getting hung up because people just are so afraid that they're going to get taken to the cleaners somehow. Well, they're worrying about things that haven't happened yet. There's nothing in any of these agreements, nothing in any of this track record that can show the cause for the concern that they're showing. So, you know, at some point, and I believe that we're already there, I think the risk management portion of this is becoming very inefficient and very costly to all of these programs. I think it's a terrible thing, and we need to figure out a way. And I believe that you folks right there, I think it's a lot of it is in your hands, because I think that if the message comes from you that the driving force for this stuff needs to come from ODOT rather than from the attorneys, then I think that maybe some of that can get changed. Go ahead.
Our attorney, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking as an attorney, I'm just shocked to hear that you think attorneys are overly risk averse. I've never heard that.
I knew I'd step on somebody's toes. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Please.
I wanted to go back on the economic question that you asked a little bit, and this is meandering even further than you were meandering, Mary Jo. I know that the acts were set up because Matt came out and twisted your arm, Steve, and they're really kind of a creature of ODOT. But certainly for Umatilla County and Morrow County, and I think probably to a large extent Union County too, that river is a key transportation corridor. And I'm pretty sure this is the case, but I certainly hope it's the case that as you're talking with your legislators, you're also reminding them of the importance of that river to transportation and really to the economy out here. We lose transportation on that river, and we're talking about really serious economic consequences for this area. And our legislators, I think, need to be reminded of that periodically.
Can I, you're speaking of Snake River?
Well,
Columbia River,
Columbia,
okay.
yeah.
Well, both.
Ball Snake, too, yeah.
Last Monday, I did have the opportunity to meet with Energy Secretary Rick Perry and several legislators, both congressmen, both from Oregon and Washington, and we stressed the importance of the transportation side of that, and of course, wanting to sell some of the assets, make it privatize it. And the other issue was breaching for the Snake River dams. We pointed out the importance of the transportation, how much it relieved highway congestion, trucks, one barge taking 27 semis worth of wheat. A tug will transport 4 barges at once down the river. So the amount of diesel, all of it put together, and the fact that 1/3 of the wheat in the western U.S. comes through the port of Lewiston. And so that was huge economically. That would be as bad, if not worse, than when some of the spotted owl issues, loss of the mills, and the list of things goes on. So that's a huge part of that transportation package also, not to mention the power grid that's involved.
The other thing I want to say on it, sort of moving to a different topic, is that when we were here as a commission, I don't know what it was, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I remember you, Mary Jo, talking about what was happening out here in terms of bungling together a transit system. And we've been working on this statewide transportation plan for public transportation, and J.D. Tovey from the tribes has been sitting on that group, and I'm learning more and more about what you're doing out here. And I just want to say it is kind of inspiring. It really is. And I really look forward to seeing what now you're going to be able to do with some steady revenue. Not as much as we'd like, but it's a start. And I look forward to great things in terms of public transportation out here in this region, because you've got such a great start already.
Please.
If I might, going back to Commissioner Simpson, one thing I really like is the way the Oasis way it's been reworked, you know, where the large counties out here with a lower population are getting, you know, more of the dollars on the ground. And you got to appreciate too that a lot of the metro area uses this not only as their playground, but also as their renewable energy resource. But one thing they do grow out here is of course livestock and onions. And I think it bears mentioning the transload facility, you know, that's going to come out of this in Malheur County. That's huge. You know, it's going to, I mean, $15–20 million it's going to save them. It's going to hold a lot of folks there whole too. So so those kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be asphalt. You know, I don't know whether you know a livestock kill plant, you know, out here or something, a USDA plant, you know, where you can process, because it's got to be in the processing of these ag products out here is really where you can make it work. But so thinking outside of the box and bringing things like that in is pretty huge.
Great. And Tom, your comments are not lost on me on the contracting piece either, or any of us really. I think in order for us to execute what is in the package, we will have to work closely with our sister agencies, which is the Department of Administrative Services, Department of Justice, really all of us rowing in the same direction to make sure that we can actually fulfill what's necessary. So thank you for bringing that up. And don't be shy if there are other things that you want us to know. I mean, if we hear your example of ways in which there's a barrier, we can't move it if we don't know of it. So
yeah,
please.
To that, the only reason I bring it up now is because coming to this point has been a big frustration for not only me, but I hear this from a number of county road officials. It's not just I'm not just being the squeaky wheel here, and I won't pretend to speak for them, but it's moving forward. I just hate to see this thing go in more of a negative direction, you know. Because it's not working very efficiently. It's costing a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer dollars. I understand, you know, we all have risk in our household and our everyday life, and we manage that without a lot of agreements. And sometimes sometimes it goes bad, but if you add up all the times it doesn't go bad, you're probably way ahead of the game. And I just want to kind of remind folks that, you know, sometimes in a effort to become better, we don't become more efficient. You know, it just doesn't work that way. Commissioner Simpson, I didn't lose your comment at all either. I can only speak to you from the road standpoint, and you asked what the counties out here were doing for themselves to try to move some of the ball forward on some of this. We recognized a number of years ago that, for instance, in Wheeler County, it would not do them any good to pass a county gas tax because, quite honestly, they'd make about $15 a year. And even to a certain extent in Baker County, most of the Eastern Oregon counties, they were in a situation where trying to move money from the county to the county road system forward just wasn't working. And that was when we started about 4 or 5 years ago working on the formula for the distribution of the state highway funds to the counties. And so, and I'm not taking any credit for that at all. I'm just saying that Eastern Oregon was very instrumental in moving that part of the package forward. It was recognized that road miles were not being looked at as any part of the funding, so we were finally able to get a little bit of parity in the system when we went with the formula for the special county allotment. And you know, it wasn't the silver bullet, but I got to tell you, counties like Wheeler County are going to be very appreciative. So so we are, and we have been doing some things for ourselves in trying to move that ball a little bit. And every little bit that happened, you know, that we get it moved, it really helps. I mean, and we appreciate it. We appreciate the taxpayers a lot.
So do we have anything that you want to highlight in the charter bylaws or the work plan? Anything in particular that you, so if not, we do have that action item. Do we have comments or other, please?
If I may, and Craig, validate this for me. When I read the bylaws and the direction that NEAC is taking here in the attachment 3, and to the to Commissioner McClure's earlier statement, I think it is well within alignment of the direction where this commission and this agency is going. Again, you are comprehensive in your approach. I think you have very creative and innovative individuals sitting around the table, and you look for those opportunities. And I think it's embedded in this document. So my read is it's extremely consistent. But I think from that I'd like to jump off and just put an issue on the table, because this is something we're going to have to grapple with. We should celebrate House Bill 2017. It is historic in nature, and it's going to do good things for the transportation system. But you also have to recognize that it's somewhat prescriptive. And so the relationship and the conversation that we've had in years past, mostly challenging because we didn't have the revenue, so how do we make things work? With the area commissions on transportation, I think is going to shift. And so maybe it's too soon, you haven't taken a look at holding, okay, here are the realities that now come at us versus that discourse that we have engaged in over many, many years to inform transportation policy programs and investments here. But if you look real close, there's a little bit of a shift here. So I think the first question tries to get at that. What do you see the axe role now? You have this significant bill that really is probably an 8-year bill over the life of it when all is said and done. You can reach out to 10 with some investment streams, that's fine. But what do we do from now until then in terms of this conversation? Just any thoughts would be appreciated.
If you don't mind.
Please.
Director. In reading through this, and then I haven't had a chance to read through the entire transportation bill and what strings come with any of this. And I think the role of the acts now are to have our meetings and dissect these things so that we have a chance among all of us to sit at the table in LeGrand like we do and have these discussions about what is that and what does it mean that we have to do now in order to get this funding piece and get it coming, like the bridge fund exchange. We had a bridge in Wallowa County that went from $750,000 to $1.8 million. We could have probably done it for a lot less, but it was a federally, so for us to be able to sit around our table with our region folks and have those discussions about where this takes us, and because I'm not cognizant enough to say now that what that little shift is and what strings are going to be, and I've got to talk to my road department guy and say, we can't do that that way anymore, and we're going to have either more paperwork or more reporting or more whatever, which puts it puts a hamper on them because they're grader operators. And I'm nowhere near qualified to be, Tom in our county.
Sure.
And Lon doesn't want to be Tom. So that's where I'd like to go with it, is to give us that amount of time in our ACT regions to get these things. And we work closely with the Southern ACT to do that.
Commissioner, I think that's more than fair and more than appropriate, because there is an opportunity to engage the agency and the commission, because we are actually going to be having the conversations of how we build future STIPs, the way we build our budget as we start to move forward now for the next legislative session, right? There's no rest for the wicked here. But I think the issues of fund exchange, those seeds are laid out there. If we grow that fund exchange, there's great opportunity. There may be other issues with the immediate opportunity fund. Again, that last connection into an industrial site that can sustain or create jobs. Those are the types of discussions that will transpire with this commission over the coming months here.
And I think using the collective wisdom of not only the county and city representatives, but then again, the collective wisdom of an area commission on transportation. You can inform that conversation as well as the overarching discussion about transportation, where we're taking it in the state of Oregon. So.
If I may add, how many strings are attached to Eastern Oregon that you have to meet to get the money in 20? And do we have strings attached to us?
Not so much strings. There are some triggers. There are some obligations.
What triggers do we have?
And responsibilities. Well, we have to report on certain things. We have to make sure that the way the state, the counties, and the cities report the condition or the health of the system, that we're coordinated. So we're going to have to align on that front. It is the accountability side of the House Bill 2017. Significant charge given to the commission, significant charge given to the agency, and I would submit a significant charge given to local governments as well. And that's fine. They're clothed in the garment of accountability, and that's a good thing. So we'll tighten those things up. I don't consider those strings. I consider that just good business. And it helps build trust and confidence. And I think that's the direction that we go here.
But from my point of view, as an act, we need to know what you people want us to do. I mean, if this is the job that we need to do and we need to change the way we're doing business, tell us, okay? And then we can answer the questions and we can participate. We can sit down and work with the cities and counties about how we're going to account for our roads, you know, so that we have a consistency across the state. I mean, that's what we can do. I don't think any of us think there's going to be a change or not going to be a change in what we do. Tell us, go right here and have this, tell us, man, what you want us to do.
Well,
and we will tackle it for you.
I'll speak for the agency. You tell us what you want your Oregon Department of Transportation to be as well. It is the dialogue that I think has been successful over the years.
Yeah.
Commissioner Brown and then Commissioner O'Halloran.
Yeah, and I look at the acts, and I helped stand up the one in Rogue Valley. And so that was a long time ago. And we didn't know what we were doing. You look at what all of you have done and the value you bring to the agency on what do you need? What's important to you? Don't stop doing that. I think that's the biggest value you provide to the agency through Craig. Craig needs to hear from you. What's important? Don't ever stop giving that information. What Craig and the agency and the commission owes you is not, oh, you can't do it that way. We owe you, here's how we can get there. Right now, I think what we're seeing is these next couple of years, few years, as we start to implement House Bill 2017, there may not be as much that we can help you because of the earmarks that are in this bill. None of us like that. Well, some of us probably do. I'm not sure I do where I live, but that's the reality of how we got this bill passed. There are some really good things with transit, but we don't know what those are yet. So we need to make sure that we give you as much information on how to do some new things, what other funding sources are out there. We don't always do as good a job as we could on what other funding sources are there, or how can you combine things to make things happen, especially when some doors are shut. Yeah. So it's a bigger job really for our ODOT folks to make sure that we feed as much information on how to do some of the things that maybe you haven't done it that way before. But don't stop talking. Don't stop bringing us your priorities. That's the biggest value that you can give us. I think what you've laid out, how I read this, it's really good. There may be something tomorrow that comes up that we'd say, hey, you should do it this way. But that's where Craig comes too. But I think you're on that path of really doing incredible things for an extremely large area, you know, in Northeast Oregon. And thank you for that.
If I could comment, I think that there's another value we don't want to forget. And we've done this for a lot of years, and we have a lot of relationships here in the NEAC, okay? And those are valuable relationships. There's a value in those relationships. There's a value when we sit down together with cities and counties and all the other partners in this thing, and we talk together. And even if it's going to be a little bit difficult for this transition, I don't think we should give that up. I mean, I think it makes a stronger organization. You get more buy-in. And sure, it's going to be a difficult time, and you guys are going to have to meet your timelines, and we need to understand that, and we will continue to work, with you in the appropriate fashion, But I don't think we should sell short just the strength of having this kind of an organization working with you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Halloran?
Madam Chair, it's obvious from the discussion, this could go on forever, but I think it's a very active and engaged act. And with that, I would move that we approve the Northeast Area Commission on Transportation update, renewal of its charter, bylaws, and work plan.
Okay, do we have further discussion? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I want to weigh in a little bit more. On the issue of the earmarks, I do think they may change a little bit the focus that the act has. And I think a number of us have had a lot of sort of concerns about the earmarks, partly because over the years ODOT has devolved a lot of authority down to the regional level. And that's been a really good thing. And in some ways, the earmarks go in the other direction. But I think the challenge for in the future, so that they understand the local needs as well as you do, and hopefully as well as the agency here has. And so that in the future, if they're tempted to go to earmarks, they're at least the earmarks that you for sure want. So I think that change that's been brought about by the legislation kind of puts you in the position of having to pay even maybe a little more attention to your elected state legislators and to some degree your federal legislators, so that they understand the kinds of priority setting and sort of group dynamic that goes on here and can appreciate it, and they end up reflecting in their decisions the priorities that you have.
So I'm in a point of procedure, though.
Yes.
I'm going to have us vote. Let's go forward. Do we have other discussion on the item that's on the table for the passage of it's the work plan, the charter, and the bylaws? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Commissioner McClure, I'll go to you, and then I'm going to go to Commissioner Givens and give you the final word before we transition into regional solutions.
I'm going to comment on earmarks. When we did the transportation in 9, Greg Smith was my legislator, and we got a lot of earmarks, okay? And someone else didn't. So we understand how the game's played. I mean, I think the benefit of the bill outweighs that, okay? And we're not going to worry about it. We'll deal with it.
Okay. Commissioner.
This is more of a question, Matt, for you. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, okay, what do we need to be doing? And I think it's a careful evaluation, even though we have those earmarks, but a careful evaluation by the NEAC, by the ACT committees, to make sure we're not wasting those dollars that the legislature fought long and hard to get for us, so that we're all on the same page. We can prove to that group, to those legislators, that we're using those dollars the way they had envisioned.
Yeah, no, I think that clarity is extremely important, and if we deliver on this set of investments, it allows us to position a conversation for the next set of investments. And just one final thing, the ability to leverage. That's another conversation you have to promote to us. What I heard, what jumped at me, a lot of different things going on in terms of transportation, and then what are the other needs? Infrastructure as a whole. And again, that's the broad definition. But the one thing I connected, if you believe in the position that transportation is a means to an end and not an end in itself, the question back to us is, how can you use transportation, this body, to help inform and connect to other opportunities? And Mary Jo articulated one aspect, fiber optics. We got a lot of right-of-way. We can maybe breach or bring together a digital divide. Those are the type of innovative conversations that are just one-off from the meat and potato discussion. And I think the area commissions on transportations can inform that kind of conversation, and that's exactly the type of conversation we need. So.
And engaging the regional solutions teams as well to be able to bring the economy. Please, go right, if you have a quick, go right ahead.
Sorry, very quickly, just about question one in the roles. Well, maybe I'm a Pollyanna, when I am sometimes, but one of the things that I try to watch out when in our rural areas, accountability is really a double-edged sword. As a taxpayer, I want every dollar accounted for, but as a provider, we have been accountability out of the ability to help. Because we spend more time doing reports and accounting and all that than we are doing less and less service. And I'm not speaking that. Actually, the public transportation is as much planning and accountability as we do is not as bad as working with DHS. And so I guess in a way that I would like to see that there be a two-way conversation of these are the accountabilities that we need, and put it out. And as a group, we're really good about discussing and trying to make things efficient. How can we efficiently report what you need and be able to provide you that feedback? And as well as continue to do all the wonderful discussions we've had in working together as partners and sharing resources to get things done efficiently in our counties. So that would be the only, as we go through this process, and the A word raises its head again, you know, just give us opportunity to, maybe we can come up with some really interesting ways to help be accountable as we need to be.
Excellent. Thank you
all.
No, I think that's wonderful. And let us, I hope that you can join us for dinner. We are going to be at the Outlaw in Joseph. We won't be outlaws, hopefully, unless you have a kind sheriff, I'm not sure. But just wanted to say this partnership is really important, and it's one in which I hope that you can feel proud about the fact that your fingerprints are on the strategic investment strategy that Commissioner O'Halloran mentioned, the visioning panel work, your voice is in that. That helps set the table for the package that we have to work with right now. And so you may feel that you are on this side of Eastern Oregon and we don't see you, don't hear you, but you are heard. And quite frankly, you've helped us really reconcile the fact that we are one Oregon, and it's important that we keep that in mind as we make decisions. So lots of ways in which we're going to ask you to be involved as we set up all the pieces that are necessary to fulfill the duties within this package. And so we look forward to further discussions, and really appreciative of all the time and investment that you put in to making Oregon's transportation system what it is.
Again, I just want to thank you for making the 68-mile off-ramp trip from LeGrand. Did you drive all the way?
All right, so let's go ahead and we will meet our partners with Regional Solutions. All right, well, welcome. We are excited to hear. You just heard the conversation. We were talking about transportation, opportunity, growth, all those things, job creation. And so we are eager to hear about the opportunities and even challenges, ways in which we can help benefit this community. And so am I turning it to you, Ken? All right, so the floor is yours, please.
Well, I'd like to thank the commission for inviting the Eastern Oregon RST up to talk to the Transportation Commission. I think in our last session we heard quite a bit about some of the economic challenges and transportation challenges, and so the mix of projects that we're going to talk about today are kind of focused on transportation, so it sounds like that was a good alignment. What I'd like to do is introduce Courtney Crowell. She's our new coordinator for the Eastern Oregon RST. She's been on the job
4 weeks.
4 weeks, and so depth of experience.
We'll have so many.
So with that, I'll turn this over to Courtney.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Baney and Commissioners. My name is Courtney Warner-Kroll. I am, like Ken just mentioned, I am the new Regional Solutions Coordinator for Governor Brown. So Regional Solutions for Eastern Oregon covers 10 counties, which is two different regional solutions regions. One is the Northeast, so Baker, Union, Wallowa, where we are now. And then we have the Greater Eastern Oregon, which is 7 counties of Gillum, Wheeler, Umatilla, Morrow, Grant, Harney, Malheur. That's it. Yes, that's it. So we've got a lot of territory. And like Ken said, I've been on the job for about a month, and it has been a wonderful experience so far, but it's mostly because I have such a wonderful team here. So we have four different agencies, including the governor's office here today. We've got Business Oregon, DEQ, and ODOT, and we do have a DLCD position that is vacant within our team. And we also work with Department of State Lands and Housing and Community Services. So that's sort of our team. And we are focused on, projects around the region to help improve community development and economic development, and transportation is obviously a key part of that. One thing I just want to sort of flag that the Regional Solutions teams will be working on over the next few months is through the legislature, we did receive $4 million statewide for the Regional Infrastructure Fund. So these are for sort of targeted investments in communities. That's statewide, so it's not a huge chunk of money for each region, but that the process for how those funds will be administered will be similar to the Connect Oregon program, is how I've been sort of told. So you guys have set up such a wonderful program that other agencies are sort of taking note. So that process will be going through the next few months. And then kind of the project I'm here to talk about is the solar eclipse. I don't know. Yeah. Wish. We're not. Yeah, it's coming up. So the Regional Solutions team sort of identified that the solar eclipse would be a major event for many regions. I think we have 3 or 4 counties, Wheeler, a little bit of Gillum, Grant, Baker, and Malheur, who are in the path of totality. So we're expecting, as you all know, many visitors to Eastern Oregon. So the team started pulling together those regions here in Eastern Oregon back in last October to start kind of planning and making sure we were prepared for the eclipse. So that included all of the tourism and visitor association folks, county emergency managers, county officials, like county elected leaders, state agencies, so everyone from, all of our state agencies, and also OHA and Oregon Department of Forestry, and also our federal partners, U.S. Forest Service and BLM. So we've been meeting monthly. It's been a really great collaboration. We've identified a lot of areas that folks out here felt we needed resources, and luckily we've been able to sort of help troubleshoot them and really find some ways. So we are excited. We feel prepared for the next few days. I know that there are a lot of sort of emergency operation centers that are being set up in the counties that are in the totality, and the governor did activate the National Guard in preparation, so we'll have National Guard resources in a few counties, and additional ambulances have been able to help serve, because many of these counties have vast areas but just not a lot of emergency vehicles and personnel to help. So that was a real key that we sort of helped take that to the state and sort of help have resources come back. So, and we are very excited for the ODOT policy of push, pull, drag that we hear is in place to keep roads open. So, we'll see how that goes.
So Central Oregon right now, you
Yes.
can't push, pull, or drag. I mean, it's actually just sit and move. Like, we should actually roll downhill. Let's just push downhill cars. Just kidding, but
Yes.
yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, and I mean, definitely Central Oregon is probably a little bit more impacted, but Eastern Oregon will be quite impacted, and we're, you know, and also another huge thing is to sort of do a lot of PSAs and education about fire prevention and making sure that that's really the number one sort of concern out here is that we're going to have a big wildfire spark. So, so we'll see how it goes, and then we'll be doing sort of aftermath. And this is, you know, we feel just statewide an opportunity to really collaborate and look at best practices and, you know, resiliency efforts for future events, potentially the Cascadia earthquake. So nice. So, and I will turn it over to Ken.
Okay, so the project I'd like to talk about is one that's been before the commission before through some just amendment actions, but it's the Gentura Cutoff Road project. It's an important project for for Malheur and Harney counties. This is a project that requires quite a bit of partnership, and that's why it was an RST project. Looking back through the funding, by the time we fully got this thing put together, it required funding from 9 different entities, you know, in various degrees. So the Federal Lands Access Program brought $2 million to the table. The IOF, approved through the board, commission here, you know, brought $1 million to the table. The legislature in 2016 brought $2 million to the table. ODOT Enhance, we had a project that in the 15-18 STIP that we pulled some money out of it because it wasn't going to be a viable project. So we also in that area, so we went ahead and moved a little bit of money into this project for the tune of about $490,000. Each of the counties are bringing $125,000 to the table. The company, Eagle Pitcher, they're bringing $250,000 to the table. Business Oregon IFA Fund is bringing $315,000. And then Business Oregon Strategic Reserve is bringing $415,000 to the table. So all told, this project's going to be about $6.7 million in total cost. The reason this project's important, Eagle Pitcher, they're a company that mines diatomaceous earth, similar to kitty litter, absorbent material, and they've had a long-standing operation where they're mining material out near Druzy in Harney County, and then they ship it by truck towards Vail, where they actually process it, package it, and ship it by rail or by truck to their ultimate customers. The current road that leads to the mine from our state highway to the mining operation is about 7.5 miles long. And the condition of that road has deteriorated to the point where the existing 28-foot width doesn't exist anymore. The base is completely failed. The potholes are large enough that semi-trucks are having to dodge these potholes, and you know, it's not safe to really navigate the road for the company. At the same time, the company's had an increase in demand for their product, and they would like to expand production, but with the condition of that road, they're not able to bring more vehicles up there safely because trucks are not maintaining their lane. It's just not a safe road. So, you know, that was the justification for the IOF. You know, they're able to expand this project. It's going to create 23 new jobs. You know, based on what we heard earlier, jobs in Eastern Oregon are very important. So 23 new jobs for Harney and Malheur County is a good investment. It's a high priority for the area. And so we've had a lot of support for this. What's gone on to date is, of course, the IOF agreement's been signed and executed late last year. The bond sale for the legislative dollars available in the design phase. So we've gone through a procurement to get a consultant design firm on board, and they are, the contract has been negotiated. It's currently sitting at DOJ review, and we're looking forward to get moving on this project so that we can be building this in 2018. So that's kind of the Gentura project. It's been a great. Oregon has worked really hard to pull all the firms together, and the counties on the same page, and there's a little bit of ownership for everybody that's involved in this project, and we think it's going to be a real successful project.
it's a good example of that partnership of figuring out, finding a common goal, and then just moving incrementally toward it, figuring out how you can blend and braid and bring those funds together. And I think as we had the earmark conversation, that's how we will have to think about projects, especially in this short run, that it can be done. And I think it's great to see that this is happening. Wonderful.
Thanks.
You betcha.
Right. Chair Painey, Commissioners, Director Garrett, thank you for joining us here in Eastern Oregon. My name is Randy Jones, and I represent DEQ on the Regional Solutions team. So I want to highlight a couple projects that I'm deeply involved with on behalf of the team that is on and have been on our list and pushing forward, and I expect that they will be for some time. I appreciate the earlier comment, Commissioner Simpson, that around what does Eastern Oregon's economy look like if it's to be sustained into the future, and economy. The first is in Malheur County. It's about 25 miles south of Vail, and it is prototypic Southeast Oregon sagebrush country, where in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was a large underground deposit of gold identified. There was a large Canadian company that eventually purchased those claims, and there was 15 to 18 individual claims purchased, one of which was a patented claim over the top of this large ore body that is located at a depth of 750 to 900 feet. Calico Resources, now wholly owned by a U.S. company, Paramount Nevada Gold, and they've taken over all operations, permitting, and the future of this project. For 5 years now, they have been collecting required data to document existing environmental conditions, ranging from wildlife, certainly sage grouse conditions, to water resources, to wildlife habitat, air quality, to transportation, and so on. They've finished that data collection effort, and now they are incrementally now moving toward assembling all of their state permit applications that they expect to submit first quarter 2018, maybe early second quarter 2018. The significance of this project for the region is that, indeed, this is a chemical mining process. It's a hard rock underground extraction, and then a chemical mining separation of resource from ore in such a way that is really fairly environmentally benign in a series of closed vessels, unlike past practices across the West, even in southwestern Oregon, where our statewide rules were written around chemical mining processes to put a stop to those historic practices in Oregon anyway. This company has proceeded further through those rules and statutes than anyone in Oregon's history. There are wagers across the international mining industry whether or not they're going to get a permit, because Oregon's been closed for a long time. This company represents about 200 jobs for a 2 to 3 year construction period, and 150 jobs long-term over the life of mine, which is 10 to 12 years. And these are the company has expressed numbers around the $85,000 to $90,000 a year jobs. So these are sustainable family wage jobs for sure. The 13 to 15 other targets, by the way, represent the potential that this mine, once an $80 million processing facility is constructed, the operation may last in Oregon as long as 20 to 30 years. So that depreciated value over a longer period, obviously the company is very interested in that. Locally, there will be, it's estimated that there will be about a $13 million annual local economic churn across Vail, Nissa, Ontario, and so on. Highway 2026 out of Ontario toward Vail, and Highway 20 out of Vail heading somewhat southwest are the primary state routes leading up to the southbound gravel access to the mine. This will be these segments will be subjected to that heavy mining equipment traffic for a time here over the next few years. So this is a 9-state agency effort, and I can tell you that there are many more experienced people than I am that are watching this and are saying they've never seen such a transparent and open process. So this is a great collaboration, and it's led by Dogami, and I'm helping at the technical review team level, and I'm a lot closer out here than folks in Portland and Salem. So the second project to highlight is a push forward toward forest health, ultimately. And that's the idea of turning our non-commercial diameter trees across largely our public lands into an energy product called torrefied biomass. So the idea is that the cellulosic bonds have energy; those are preserved, and those are processed down into cubes, briquettes that are very, very dense, both physically dense and energy dense, more energy per unit volume than coal. PGE, for instance, at Boardman and their big power plant there, they've made the decision some years ago to stop burning coal as a fuel source by the end of 2020. They have been participating in part in the effort to find a new fuel that's a sustainable fuel, that's a cleaner burning fuel. The National Endowment for Forestry and Communities has been supporting financially an effort through Oregon Torrefaction, a new emerging private sector company, but in partnership with Malheur Lumber and with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, to look at what it would take in terms of setting up supply chains out of our national forests to feed either markets like PGE Boardman or potentially even Asian markets with a pretty efficient and clean burning fuel source, an industrial fuel source. The result, obviously, and I think obviously, is that our fire threat out on our national forests, which we spend so much money suppressing, those saved monies could be spent otherwise, other ways. Our historic labor force, in large part, still exists in our rural communities that can staff and serve these supply chains. So what's exciting is that as we speak, the Oregon Torrefaction Consortium is working in Prineville to, as a first start, to site a mobile torrefaction reactor to process material. And it may be there will be a decision in the next couple weeks. It may be that they would actually start in John Day, simply because of our federal partnering on the Malheur National Forest and the years of infrastructure we've generating chips that can be turned into point of service and sale. So there are engineering results that look very promising. The volume is very large and demanding. It is a big question economically, mathematically, and from an infrastructure standpoint, how we transport such great volumes. And it likely is not going to be limited to surface transport. Indeed, especially if an Asian market is viable, the Columbia River, mentioned earlier, will be a key artery getting to, say, Clatskanie and the public dollars we've invested at Port Westward. The next few years will tell the tale as to whether this is an emerging industry in Oregon and across the West, frankly. Thank you.
So no Back on the long-term sustainability contracts for product, or is that?
I interact a lot with the federal forest supervisors. Some are more open to the stewardship contracting framework than others, but most understand that it is relatively simple, it's relatively efficient, and I think eyes will be on Iron Triangle and their stewardship contract in John Day here coming up.
So I have to say, I've never heard DEQ advocate for gold mining. That is pretty cool. I need to talk to you some more, but that is
or wood burning.
Or wood burning. And I made a comment as you were talking about this. I felt like Shark Tank, that we're up here like Shark Tank, but very cool projects that you're talking about. So thank you very much.
So we can have a conversation offline about air quality benefits. Yes, we can.
Chair Beatty, members of the commission, pardon me, Director Garrett. My name is Scott Fairley. I think last time I spoke with you, I was the Regional Solutions Coordinator. However, I wanted a job that was closer to the money, and ODOT wasn't hiring, so I'm now the Southeast Regional Development Officer for Business Oregon, covering Grant, Hardin, and Malheur County. So it's a pleasure to speak with you all again this evening. The project I'm going to talk with you about is not yet a Regional Solutions project, but it is one that we anticipate will become a Regional Solutions project. And that would be the Treasure Valley Intermodal Facility, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that was funded in the last transportation bill that was recently approved. So the genesis of this project came actually many, many years ago, I'm not sure, probably 10 years ago or longer, from the onion growers in the Treasure Valley. Most of their market for onions is on the East Coast, Chicago and New York, and they were spending thousands of dollars per truckload to get onions east. So they did some investigation, and they found they could use the RailX facility up on the Wallula at the Port of Umatilla, or pardon me, Port of Walla Walla in the Columbia River. Cost about $600 to $900 per truckload to get onions up there, only for those very same onions to go back through the Treasure Valley on the next day on a RailX car heading east. So as you can imagine, that caused a little consternation amongst growers down there. It puts them at a competitive disadvantage. So they talked internally amongst themselves, and that ultimately ended in a conversation by Malheur County Economic Development and outreach to RailX to come look at Malheur County and see whether it would be a good fit for a similar kind of facility. So RailX officials came out about a year ago to the county. They looked at several sites. They talked to onion growers. They talked to other folks, other potential shippers. And their kind of take-home message was, we think there is an opportunity for a facility here, which kind of got to the placement of that proposed facility in the bill. So where we are now in all this, is, you may know, but the county has formed a 501c4 organization to kind of govern this proposed facility. They are now calling themselves the Malheur County Development Corporation. They have appointed 7 board members. There's representing a lot of onion growers, other people from agriculture, people with finance background, and local government are represented on the board. They are in the process currently, well, I should say they have adopted bylaws and articles of incorporation. They are in the process now of putting together a draft plan, which I believe they want to at least begin to talk with you at your next meeting about what that plan looks like, on how money for the facility would be spent, where and when to, that with your approval would release funding for some preliminary engineering and eventual construction of the transload facility. So the outcome of all of this, once it finally gets built, I think, the Wallula facility, the RailX facility, will also have, for Malheur County, it's a tremendous, they have identified 5 sites. The folks, RailX was bought out by Union Pacific. They're coming to Malheur County later this month to look at sites. And so by the end of August, the board should have a pretty clear indication of the site they're looking for. And Business Oregon has allocated some funding to hold that site until the funding outlined in the transportation package can be released. So from my perspective, I'm new with with Business Oregon, I'm very excited. This is a tremendous opportunity for the region, honestly. And I think it's a great opportunity, again, to partner with Department of Transportation, Ken, and other staff, and really all of us up here to help kind of coordinate on the technical and financial piece of this project and really help bring it in quickly and expeditiously so that the region really realizes the benefits we think it has the potential to bring. The next project I want to talk about, and I don't, does anyone have any questions on the transload facility? I'm sure you're all very well versed with that.
It's exciting, and I'm looking
really
forward
exciting.
to more as it goes forward.
Yeah,
So
no, it's very exciting.
awesome.
Thank you. The last one I want to talk about is really about as far away from a regional solutions project as you could come, but I just really like it, so I want to talk about it. And that is an opportunity that came to Burns. And actually, not only was there no need for interagency collaboration, there's really no need for collaboration at all. They came to Burns and they said, look, we want to locate here, and if we can't do it, we're not going anywhere. And that is, of all things, a FedEx distribution facility, which is locating at some industrial land in Hines. They're going to start off kind of modestly with, let's see, 4 to 6 employees, but they anticipate branching out to 12. 1 to 2 trucks a day initially, branching from there. But the most interesting part of this project is, I asked the judge, I said, that's interesting, a distribution center in Hines, what are they distributing? It'd be interesting to know that. And I don't remember what he called it, but it's essentially an online sales distribution center. So I would anticipate coming back to you next year requesting funds to add a couple lanes to Highway 20, because I think this could really grow and be a significant opportunity for Burns as well. So thank you for your time this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Boehne, Commissioners, Director Garrett, Melissa Drugi, Lead Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon, and I serve Umatilla, Morrow, and Gillum and Wheeler counties only. We don't have to go on and on and on, right? I'm the happiest of the 3 of us up here. Today I'm going to talk about the data center activity occurring in Umatilla County. And so most recently, the Regional Solutions team early this year worked on land use issues around the 2 properties that the data center company was looking at in Umatilla County. The first one is located near Westland Road, which is, it's actually off the exit of Westland Road. They're off of I-84. And they required a zone change, and we were successful in helping them kind of go through what processes they needed to get through, what they were going to be doing with the county, and making that zone change, and that was approved. And then they went through a similar situation with their City of Umatilla property as well. So we as a team met with them, talked about that, kind of guided them in the fact that land use was first, and then kind of said, you know, what's next? And so as we're moving through with this project, we'll be looking at some transportation developments that are both related to their site on for them specifically, but also some public road improvements that'll be needed on both sites. So both the ODOT representatives and myself have met with the city and the county to talk about those projects. It looks as though we're probably going to see some IOFs. I do have, for Umatilla County, kind of a draft and some estimated costs. It looks like it's about a $600,000 project, so you'll see me in the future. But I think for these are exciting for us in that these jobs are, you know, they say, well, they don't create a lot of jobs for the investment they make, but in Eastern Oregon, you're looking at initially starting at each site 40 jobs that have a starting wage of about $68,000. That's a huge impact to Eastern Oregon. And we just recently finished a workforce training center in the Port of Morrow with Blue Mountain Community College. And this particular data center was instrumental in helping develop the curriculum for that training. And they also are volunteering instruction for that training program. So there's a real collaboration between the community and this company, And it just seems that as we move forward in developing these, that you also have to look at the fact that there's a huge impact of indirect jobs related to the construction and the security. They contract their security out, but even in some of the other past developments, the construction jobs have stayed on for years because they build them one building at a time and continue to go. So we're seeing this as a really great opportunity for some additional job creation and great starting wages for Umatilla County. The other project that I just want to touch a little bit on, because I know we're running up against time, but I do want to mention the Umatilla Army Depot from the standpoint that I just want to make sure that you have an update on land transition from the federal government to the two entities. First, the Columbia Development Authority, which really will be managing the piece that's the industrial piece in Umatilla County mostly, and they're projecting this year for December 1st of 2017. On a more exciting note, we may be hearing that the National Guard piece could transfer as early as the end of this month or the beginning of next month. So they're going to transfer the National Guard piece hopefully soon. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the $7 million that's part of the House Bill 2017 for the access road. So, thank you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Brian McDowell, Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon. I actually cover this region, Region 11, Baker, Union, and Wallowa counties. Excuse me. Project I wanted to talk about was Baum Industrial Park. That's Bravo Alpha Uniform Mike. So Baum, not the other bomb. So, I'll keep this kind of brief because I think it's I'm between us and drinks, right? So yes. So Baum Industrial Park is located in La Grande. It's a 60-acre industrial site that's been worked on for a little while now. It got funding from the regional solutions team last round for, was it 750, I think, or $1 million?
1.8.
Or, oh, okay. Yeah, a pretty significant amount of funding to finish up, somewhere between, I think it was 1.2 and 1.8 million from regional solutions. So Commissioner Donna Beveridge from Union County has been instrumental in kind of picking that up recently and really kind of getting it moving forward. So we're at the point now where the site is shovel ready. It can cover heavy industrial, food processing, general manufacturing, regular manufacturing, shipping and storage, and then warehouse and distribution. So it's on 60 acres, and at least in Union County, I believe that's the largest industrial park, and there's a big shortage of sites that are ready to go that can be marketed or be improved further within, let's say, 180 days. So if somebody wants to come in and they need something done with the infrastructure that isn't there yet, it can be done pretty rapidly. So pretty big win there. As far as transportation's concerned and why it's important is there's very few of these sites that have this access. So the airport is about 173 miles away from the park. The main one, the regional airport in Pendleton, is 58 miles. The interstate is 4 miles. The highway is half a mile. And then rail line is 0.2 miles. So, and then the marine port is 96 there in Umatilla. So part of the challenge with transportation was how do we get the last 0.2 miles there of roads so that they can get to all these other transportation avenues and make it much more attractive. So that was just finishing up this week and last week, I believe. This site should be a pretty promising and big site for Union. And then just in the broader perspective, I think there's one other industrial site in Union. There's one site at least one site, the Elkhorn View, in Baker County, and then working with Mayor Sands. We may have a very small industrial park in Joseph that we can work on that's 6 acres. But in terms of the whole region, this would definitely be a huge plus, and to have the transportation now getting completed should help tremendously. So, but it took a huge team effort. So anyway, so that's in short, but I can answer any questions.
Is the Baum Industrial Park owned by the county?
Yes.
And how, tell me again how big it is?
60 acres.
60 acres?
60.
Have there been industry snooping around saying, you know, we continue to have conversations? Have you had any distraction?
From our recruiting folks, lightly, but it's part of the issue has been, is it really shovel ready? Does it have broadband capability and broadband at the level that we need it? And we just confirmed literally last week that it does and can. We were working with a couple of the providers and just confirming, hey, if somebody came in here and needed a significant different, you know, level of broadband, can that be done? And the answer was yes. So I think we'll get a lot more inquiries because we can be much more proactive in marketing it and working with the county to market it now that we know everything's a go.
What's impressive to me is that we also heard about capacity earlier, and for smaller counties and communities to be able to have this level of detailed surgical strikes in terms of working to really figure out the economic vitality to this part of the state is just critical to the success. And it's great to see, you know, the partnership and everyone. It's you know, you blur lines here, and that's a good thing because we're serving the same people all across the state. So how do we make sure that all boats are rising? I love the interaction with Blue Mountain, the community college, and that workforce development. And I mean, I'm just hearing all the pieces that you hope happen in a community, and then that extra hand to make sure that a small community can actually fulfill that and get it happening. So really thrilled to hear about the projects. Do we have particular comments or questions?
Sounds like pretty darn exciting.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the day. So I think we will go ahead and recess until tomorrow. Thank you for your hard work. Great to see you, and I hope you can join us for dinner.